Welcome to another episode of Bargain Saturdays, and this week I decided to take a look at Super Miss, a 2018 superhero film from the Netherlands, based on books of the same name, I would assume. So one of those obscure foreign superheroes I've never heard of before. Though I'll admit this film itself seems a bit obscure because all there is a score for it on the Internet Movie Database of about 6. There isn't a single review submission on that site for the film itself, which is a bit weird because usually even when I talk about stuff like Stone NATO and whatnot, like there's at least some people that submit a written review, maybe not a super detailed or in depth review, but a review. But for Super Miss, nothing. I mean, there are some short reviews you can find online on some other sites, but not the Internet Movie Databases, which would be like one of the primary sites you'd find a film like this. So yeah, it does feel a bit more out there in the depths, of the movies about superheroes that are out there altogether. As for the film itself, I found this one a hard watch. This isn't necessarily a statement about the quality of the film, but the fact is that this film's from the Netherlands, so when they did the English voice for this film, they dubbed over all the actors, and it just feels off. Like it's very off-putting for me. It's like sort of like when I was a kid and I tried to watch Ultraman Tiga, and I just couldn't do it because just hearing those English voices coming out of the characters was so distracting for me. I'm just like, no, I'm out. So
This isn't right.
Yes. No! I'm sorry.
yeah, like I try sitting down and watching this as much as possible, but I'm just like times I have to just get up and do some pacing and stuff, then come back. So I'm sure I missed quite a few jokes here and there, but yeah. Some would argue that'd be reason enough to have picked a different movie to talk about, but I'm just like, I'll offer up my 5 cents anyway. As for the plot, basically we follow Josie, a new teacher, who's moving into her aunt's old house. And of course, for comedic effect, she's late on her first day and gets in trouble with the principal, who also has to introduce her because, that's just how things work in fictional works, like the principal has to introduce you to your new class, like every single time, it seems. At any rate, after a questionable first day, she goes to her aunt's house, and we have a cleaning montage as she tries to tidy the place up a bit, and runs into her aunt's old cat, who's still living there. And while she's cleaning, she eventually notices, a room that, has like a door that's slightly hidden somehow. She kept walking past for a while, but she decides to go in and explore. She's like, yeah, this room's super creepy, but I just have to check it out. And eventually finds, a sculpture that's been hidden inside the wall. And after taking it out, into the living room and stuff, she ends up being a klutz when the cat starts messing with her bird, Mr. Peeps. So she knocks the sculpture over and breaks it, which releases magic powder, which turns her into Super Miss. Of course, after transforming, being so rough on her body, I guess she ends up oversleeping and shows up late to her second day of class, getting in trouble with the principal again. But when the day's over, she can start hearing a voice calling for help, so she eats some chalk, turns into Super Miss, and flies off. Yes, our super heroine here gains her powers from eating chalk. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird one. I mean, I know with Ant Boy he had to eat sugar, and his opponent was, based on a flea, so he had to drink blood for his powers, but chalk? Like, what could be in the chalk that, grants activates their superpowers exactly, like how does this work? It just seems dumb. I mean, obviously, I guess it's meant to be funny that she has to eat chalk to activate her powers, but it just seems stupid rather than comedic. But at any rate, after flying off, and crash landing, she finds out that a bunny was calling for help because apparently it got super lost. Like it somehow had gotten like miles away from its home. So I honestly don't know if the owners had taken it out to the park and then the bunny had wandered off and they eventually just gave up on finding it or what. But Super Miss shows up and after a few false takeoffs, eventually takes up to the sky and takes the rabbit home and destroys the rabbit's hutch, during her landing. Of course, the rabbit's like, yeah, it's cool. I prefer, being out in the garden anyway. Like, but what about the birds and stuff, Like, don't you want to have a place to hide? I guess the bunny's like, I don't care. The humans will fix my hutch soon enough anyway. Don't worry about it. So then she, takes off. And we just get this for a couple more animals, just randomly calling for help. So she'll, like, leave from class or whatnot to go help them out. Before we get the main plot of the film where we learn about, a new director taking over the zoo and how a baby tiger has gone missing. We now have to, wonder what happened to the baby tiger. Of course, as things go on, we get more clues and hints that the new director, after, she made her dad slash, or maybe uncle, I forget those details, disappear, so she's now the acting director. She's been, selling these baby animals on the black market, or at least she plans to. But Super Miss and her students step in and stop her, because some of her students saw her transform in school, on her second day. And they want to get involved too, because, they gotta help save that baby tiger. It's super important to them, because, it's cute. Of course, after she, gets proof, well, breaking and entering, and goes to the police about it, that goes about as well as you expect. So she's forced to step in as Super Miss, and save the day. I'm not sure how that would go over any better, but, she does find the actual director, and the kids help save him because he gets put into like a freezer, and is being frozen to death by his own relative. But they manage to use some chemistry to break the lock or the hinges while Super Miss is trying to catch the criminal before the buyers can show up and take away all the baby animals. And of course, the villain's weapon of choice is a tranquilizer gun, for putting all the animals to sleep so she can take their babies. But she thinks it's going to work on a superhero. To be fair, I don't know how invulnerable Super Miss is, but she does possess super speed and enhanced strength, so she easily dodges the tranquilizer dart and just throws it back and hits her square on the nose, causing her to pass out in some poop. The villain passes out in some poop. And then the actual director shows up and is like checking out the animals, and then, everyone lives happily ever after with her returning them and her doing more superhero work as Super Miss. So, yeah, we got some obvious gags with her, crash landing multiple times as she tries to get used to her powers. Stuff like that. I have to admit, though, her power list seems a little less impressive than a Super Furball, though both can talk to animals. Albeit Super Miss is disappointed to learn that her bird cannot really talk to her because her bird is a bird brain. Yes, that's literally a joke in the movie. Like, the cat points out the fact that the only thing her bird can say is peeps. Just over and over and over again. That's it. Cat's like, yeah, birds are stupid. You can't really hold a conversation with them, but apparently bunny rabbits and rats are super smart and can definitely hold a complicated conversation, unlike a bird. Oh well. Till next time, then. See ya.
We're gonna fly. What? We're going to fly? Are you sure you can fly? When are we taking off? Yeah. Be patient. It's my first time, What are you doing? Stop! Well, this isn't going to work. Whoa! Stop! This is so high! Help, Mommy! Let's try to find your house as quickly as we can! Okay. was my house. Oops. Sorry. It doesn't matter. I prefer being in the garden anyway.